cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, and sex discrimination. What time do I have? Another big issue is access to contraception. This is linked closely to coercive population control. If women don't have access to condoms, birth control pill, intrauterine devices, female condoms, injectables, the rates of maternal mortality increase, rates of unsafe abortion increase, women experience intense mental anguish as a result of unplanned or unwanted pregnancies, you have increased rates of sexually transmitted infections and reproductive tract infections, and you have an increased risk associated with sterilization surgeries, and of course you have rampant inequality, because again, women's bodies become the objects of reproductive rights violations. So right now, the unmet need for access to contraception in the world is 73%. That means 73% of married women between the age of 15 and 49 in the world cannot access contraception. This means they don't want to have more kids, and they cannot access the means to do that. In India, the current unmet need is, I didn't put it, but it's around 54% in India. A lot of this there isn't any data for. So for Sri Lanka, for example, I couldn't find data. Pakistan is at 24.9%. No data for Afghanistan. Nepal at 28%. Bangladesh at 16.8%. And that means that those women have no means of preventing pregnancy, which means in all of these countries where the maternal mortality rate is very high, with each pregnancy that they take on, they're actually risking their lives because they don't have a condom, right? This evokes the right to life, the right to health, the right to reproductive autonomy, the right to be free from cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, and the right to be free from discrimination. This here is a Rohingya refugee from Myanmar who gave birth to the baby in the picture, which isn't coming out so well. The day before this picture was taken in a refugee camp in Delhi. So what are the legal protections that are supposed to be protecting us from all of these issues that I just discussed? So in India, we have the Constitution, which Article 21 guarantees everything, but chiefly the right to life. You have Article 14 and 15, which are equality before the law and prohibition of discrimination based on sex. You also have specific laws. So, for example, you have the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act from 1971. You have the PCPNDT Act, which is the Preconception, Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act. I left out a letter. That basically says that sonography technicians are not allowed to reveal the sex of the fetus to a couple. You have Persons with Disability Act. You have specific laws on tribals. You have specific laws that target some of these issues. You also have jurisprudence, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then you have a lot of different government schemes, which the center government spends a little bit of money on and holds the states accountable for implementing these. So you have the NRHM, which is the National Rural Health Mission. You have the NMBS, which is a National Maternity Benefit Scheme. Official guidelines on sterilization. I could give you the whole alphabet for all of the schemes that there are on maternal health and adolescent health. On the international level, there's even more protections, and they're even more solid, and they're even more specific. So you have the Convention Against Torture, which specifically says that coercive sterilization or any other surgery that you don't consent to is a form of torture. You have the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability, which has equality under the law, specific articles about protecting disabled persons' fertility and choices about their fertility. You, of course, have the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which protects the right to health. You have CEDAW. You have the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I think you are all probably very familiar with these different international documents, but they all have very specific protections for reproductive rights. And the Rome Statute, which is the statute for the International Criminal Court, also recognizes forced pregnancy, forced abortion, forced sterilization, and any sort of population policy that's used as a method of warfare as a war crime and a crime against humanity, which is a newish development in the field. So now I'm going to talk to you about some of the cases that HRLN has done in the field of reproductive rights and some of the outcomes that we've had. So the first case, which is really our landmark groundbreaking case, is Lakshmi Mandal versus Deen Dayal Harinagar Hospital and others. This is a case from the Delhi High Court. Shanti Devi was a woman who she was pregnant. She had very intense abdominal pain, and she went to 4 or 5 different hospitals, and they all refused to treat her because she couldn't pay for the treatment. So HRLN intervened on her behalf. We got her admitted into the hospital. They found out that she had been carrying a dead fetus in her womb for 5 days, which is an extreme risk of infection and death. So they removed the fetus. We filed a case on her behalf. While we were arguing the case on her behalf, she became pregnant again. And sometimes when I tell this story, especially to young students, they say, "What an idiot. How did she become pregnant again?" Or, "What's wrong with her husband? Why do they continue to have sex?" We have to look at this in the context where they have no sex education, and they have no access to contraception, and they have no access to primary health care. So it's not shocking that she probably didn't have a lot of agency to say no to her husband either, right? So this is the context that she lives in. She becomes pregnant again. Right before, she has no access to health care again, no antenatal care, and she had abdominal pain again, she started bleeding, and she ended up bleeding to death. The baby survived, and we filed a case on her behalf. As a result of this case, the Delhi High Court became the first high court in the world to say that a woman has a right to survive pregnancy, and that women in India have reproductive rights, and that a woman has a right to survive pregnancy with dignity. And the decision is great. It cites all of the articles of the Constitution that you would want it to. It cites all of the international law that you would want it to. It bolsters all of the government schemes. And it makes really great specific orders that involve giving compensation to the family, changing the breadwinner scheme so that if a woman dies, the family is also entitled to that financial that financial compensation, monitoring of reproductive rights violations, and again, mentioning reproductive rights as fundamental rights. And this is Lakshmi Mandal, who is the petitioner in the case, who is actually Shanti Devi's brother-in-law. And then that also spawned the Sumoto case from the Delhi High Court, which I can tell you about later, but I think I only have a few minutes left. Right? A few minutes left? Okay, so I'll skip a few of these cases. This is an interesting case. This is the case of Hallo B versus MP and others. This case, we in the office just read an article about a woman in Indore. It was a very short article, who had been arrested for murdering her husband, who was pregnant in jail and was wanted an abortion and couldn't get an abortion because the jail said no. So we called up the journalist, we called up our advocate, Shano Shagupta Khan, who's there in Indore, and we found out that this woman had actually been trafficked. So this was maybe the 4th or 5th man she had been sold to work to, and she did kill him. And she was pregnant with his child, and she wanted to terminate the pregnancy. She asked the warden in the jail, and the warden said, "You have to ask a court for permission to terminate your pregnancy." And that's not in the law in India. The law in India says that up to a certain amount of time, a woman has a right to have an abortion with her doctor's consent, basically. So we filed a petition on her behalf in the High Court. This involved a lot of counseling with our advocate there, who had to go with her to the doctor's office, to the hospital, who had to really find out what she wanted as an individual. And eventually the High Court did hold that Hallo B had a right to terminate her pregnancy under the law, and that in fact the prison warden and or the magistrate judge had no right interfering with that decision. This is another great case from the Delhi High Court. It's called Priya Kale versus NCT of Delhi and others. Again, this was something that we found in the newspaper. This is Priya Kale here with her son. Her son here was delivered in a park in Delhi just before the Commonwealth Games. And I think just hours after he was delivered, the cops came and chased everyone out and beat Priya pretty severely. A few years later, she had a baby girl, which she delivered in a shelter here in Delhi. And about 2 months after she was born, the baby died from exposure because the conditions in the shelter were so horrific. So we went and we did a fact-finding, and we filed a case in the Delhi High Court advocating for the women's reproductive rights to survive pregnancy with dignity and for the right to have maternal care, meaning antenatal care, delivery care, and postnatal care. As a result of our petition and our fact-finding, the Delhi High Court issued some really amazing interim orders that heaters be put in the shelter immediately, that they have access to hot water, that all of the pregnant women, and there are a lot of them, get antenatal care and are registered for care, and also that there are 3 meals a day provided to all of the residents. And the Delhi government was fine with the first 3, heaters, hot water, maternal care. The Delhi government did not want to provide food to these people, so we filed a contempt petition, and now the Delhi government is providing 3 hot meals a day to all of the people in the shelter, and all the pregnant women get regular care. Okay, Ramakant Rai versus Union of India. This is a case about coercive sterilization. This case was filed in 2003. In 2005, the Supreme Court issued very specific guidelines for sterilization surgeries in India. which emphasize informed consent, which emphasize quality assurance, and which emphasize accountability for doctors. Unfortunately, these guidelines are not implemented, nor are they followed in any way whatsoever. So we filed another petition that outlines many cases of coercive and unethical sterilization throughout India. And that's the case of Devika Biswas versus Union of India. And that case details a sterilization camp that happened in Bihar in a government middle school where a single doctor came and sterilized about 60 women in 2 hours without electricity, running water, or changing his gloves one time during the surgeries, during the camp. So we have about 50 cases right now in the Reproductive Rights Initiative. A lot of them are on maternal health, a lot of them are on these coercive population policies, a lot of them are more broadly on the right to health, and then we also have cases on abortion. And so if you're interested more in finding out about these cases, let me know, because now I'm going to move on to some of the things that have happened internationally. So both domestic, regional, and at the international level, we have a lot of really great judgments and a lot of really groundbreaking statements on women's reproductive rights. But unfortunately, it takes a tragedy for these to be promulgated at any level. Does anyone know who this woman is? Yeah. So this is Savita Halappanavar, who died on 28th October 2012 in Ireland. She was 17 weeks she was a dentist, obviously of Indian origin. She, at 17 weeks of pregnancy, went to the hospital with severe abdominal pain, and she was going through a miscarriage. But the doctor at the hospital said that the fetus still had a heartbeat, so they wouldn't perform an abortion on her, and they left it inside of her uterus. As a result, she developed a terrible infection, septicemia, and she died of multiple organ failure over being in the hospital for a week. Well, she repeatedly begged to have a termination of her pregnancy. So this happened, she died. Protests erupted on the streets in Ireland, and just very recently, I think in June of this year, you do have a new abortion law in Ireland, which allows for abortion where pregnancy would endanger a woman's life, including through suicide. And maybe some of you are thinking, well, that's Europe, so you can make changes in Europe. But it's important to remember, in the context of Europe, Ireland was, with Poland and Malta, one of 3 countries who would not change its abortion law no matter what. And because of this tragedy that happened, activists went into the streets, they went into the parliament, they went into the courtrooms, and they made sure that the law changed in the wake of this tragedy. The Supreme Court of Nepal has also issued really amazing judgments when it comes to reproductive rights. There's been about 16 reproductive rights judgments from Nepal. I'll just focus on these 2. The first one, well, I'll just focus on the second one, which actually guarantees all women in Nepal the rights to an abortion. So the woman you see here is Lakshmi Dikta, and she was pregnant for the 6th time, and she and her husband decided they could not support a 6th child in their family. So they went from facility to facility trying to get an abortion. They were rejected each time because they couldn't pay. So the Supreme Court of Nepal in 2010 held that every woman has an access, not only that abortion is a right, but also that affordable abortion is a right. Because women have the right to control what happens to their body, women have a right to health care, and therefore women have a right to abortion.